And at number 10, Jaden Smith. Celebrities are now reacting to Will Smith slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars, and we've got everything you need to know. After Chris made that joke about Jada Pinkett Smith that caused Will to get him out of his seat and slap him, you can see the visible confusion on everyone's face. Some people gasped while others applauded him, and one of those people that are standing strong on Will's side though through all of this is his son Jaden. Although several other high-profile celebrities are also reacting to the news as well. In response to the news though, Jaden Smith tweeted, "And that's how we do it." In at number 9, Liam Payne. Liam Payne also was in attendance for the Oscars when this happened and was quoted by Good Morning Britain as saying, "I believe whatever he felt that he did, he had the right to do. I had to leave my chair. I'll be honest with you, it cut me really deep." He then went on to say, "I also felt like there was 3 losers in one fight. It's a very sad thing, but there was a powerful moment for me to sit and watch one of the world's best emoters speak from the heart, and I would rather take away the beauty from the situation than take the pain. But I had to leave my chair. I'll be honest with you, it cut me really deep." And at number 8, the Academy. In response to what took place, the Academy tweeted, "The Academy does not condone violence of any form. Tonight we are delighted to celebrate our 94th Academy Award winners who deserve this moment of recognition from their peers and movie lovers around the world." And as it turns out, this situation was much deeper than it appeared. You see, this wasn't the first time that Chris Rock had made fun of the Smith family. Back in 2016, the comedian hosted the Academy Awards where both Will and Jada were in attendance. Rock made fun of Jada publicly, saying that she was going to be boycotting the show after another year of all-white acting nominees. At the time, he said, "Jada said she's not coming. I was like, isn't she on a TV show? Jada's gonna boycott the Oscars? Jada boycotting the Oscars is like me boycotting Rihanna's panties. I wasn't invited." Coming in number 7, Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj was another person defending Will in several tweets and said, "I love Chris Rock. I don't think he would have made that joke had he known what Jada recently shared, but between him and the whole team at the Oscars, you mean to tell me not one of y'all heard this woman just share this heartbreaking story? Hashtag come on son." Adding in another tweet, "You just got to witness in real time what happens in a man's soul when he looks over to the woman he loves and sees her holding back tears from a little joke at her expense. This is what any and every real man feels in that instant. While y'all seeing the joke, he's seeing her pain." And at number 6, Kathy Griffin. Comedian Kathy Griffin was another celebrity giving her 2 cents on the whole situation. She tweeted out in response to Will slapping Chris and said, "Let me tell you something, it's a very bad practice to walk up on stage and physically assault a comedian. Now we all have to worry about who wants to be the next Will Smith in comedy clubs and theaters." Although many people in her replies were quick to pull up that photo of her holding a ketchup-covered Donald Trump head as if to say that she condoned violence in some sense. Griffin made a valid point though. This will set an awful precedent for people feeling like they can just approach a comedian on stage if they don't like what's being said. In number 5, Alec Baldwin. Most people understood why comedians would stand in solidarity with Chris Rock, but a lot of people expected actors to only get behind Will Smith and his unscrupulous actions. Taking to his private Twitter page, Alec Baldwin tweeted, "I'm not reading much about how or even if the producers attended to Chris, but I love you, Chris Rock, and I'm sorry the Oscars turned into the Jerry Springer show." Alec also needed to say something because a lot of people on Twitter were quick to draw comparisons between the Will Smith slap and what happened on the set of Rust. One person tweeted, "Don't worry about the Academy punishing Will Smith. If they do, it will either be for 2 weeks like Whoopi, 6 days like Jussie, or not at all like Alec Baldwin. Hollywood is totally immune from justice." Coming in number 4, The View. As one would assume, all of the daytime talk shows were going to be talking about the now infamous slap heard around the world. The View, however, had a mixed bag of reactions from their hosts. Sonny Hostin said, "I think Will was immature, I think he was childish and he was violent," with Whoopi Goldberg saying, "There will be consequences, I'm sure, but I don't think that's what they're going to do, particularly because Chris said, 'Listen, I'm not pressing any charges.'" Anna Navarro didn't mince her words though and said, "Hitting somebody is a crime of assault." While she called Rock's quip a lame joke, a joke in very poor taste, she believes the slap and the remark were not equivalent. While Joy Behar chose to speak on the impact that this will have on comedians everywhere. Behar remarked, "They want us comedians to be edgy, to go out there and say what everyone's thinking, and then they get mad." In at number 3, Jameela Jamil. Actress Jameela Jamil also had some thoughts about the 2022 Oscars incident that is making waves across the world, attached to a Malcolm X quote that says, "The most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman." Jameela wrote in her tweet, "Will Smith said, 'Not today,' a man big enough to absolutely floor him, slapped him softly enough that Chris barely moved, because he made fun of his wife's alopecia on a world stage. Don't say hashtag protect black women for 2 years and then only condemn Will here. Come on." In at number 2, Rosie O'Donnell. Rosie O'Donnell is an American comedian, producer, actress, author, and television personality. She began her comedy career as a teenager and received her breakthrough on the television series Star Search in 1984. Her response to this incident, though, was that the Academy did not do enough after Will smacked Chris. In her tweet, she said, "So upsetting on every level. Bravo to Chris Rock for not eviscerating Will Smith, which he could do any day of the week. He walked away. Bravo from a sad display of toxic masculinity from a narcissistic madman." And last but certainly not least, on our number one spot, Will Smith. The main person that everyone wanted to hear a reaction from, though, was Will Smith himself. Yes, he sort of touched on what happened during his acceptance speech, but later on we got a full letter addressing the controversy. In response to how the world reacted to him slapping Chris Rock, Will said, "Violence in all of its forms is poisonous and destructive. My behavior at last night's Academy Awards was unacceptable and inexcusable. Jokes at my expense are a part of the job, but a joke about Jada's medical condition was too much for me to bear, and I reacted emotionally. I would like to publicly apologize to you, Chris. I was out of line and I was wrong. I am embarrassed and my actions were not indicative of the man I want to be. There is no place for violence in a world of love and kindness. I would also like to apologize to the Academy, the producers of the show, all the attendees, and everyone watching around the world. I would like to apologize to the Williams family and my King Richard family. I deeply regret that my behavior has strained what has been an otherwise gorgeous journey for all of us. I am a work in progress. Sincerely, Will."
You know the story by now. Chris Rock was hosting the Oscars when he made what people saw as an insensitive joke towards Will Smith's wife, referencing G.I. Jane, making a comment on the fact that she didn't have any hair. But Jada suffers from alopecia, so her and her husband saw the joke as pretty distasteful, as some people would probably expect. But what people didn't expect was for Will Smith to march right up on stage during the live show and slap Chris Rock across the face, returning to his seat to yell out, "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth." For a time after, it was all people could talk about as everyone was just absolutely shocked, and then things quieted down for a while. But now we have seen both Will and Chris opening up to talking about the situation. Will Smith in his incredibly strange and manufactured apology video, and Chris Rock at his various different comedy show stops. So let's see what Chris had to say at his show about potentially hosting the Oscars again next year. The weekend after the Oscars, Chris was already back to doing his tour, and his next comedy show completely sold out. Obviously, many of the people were highly anticipating some sort of response to what had taken place, but Chris denied them any satisfaction. On stage, he said, "I don't have a bunch of shit about what happened, so if you came to hear that, I have a whole show I wrote before this weekend, and I'm still kind of processing what happened. So at some point, I'll talk about that shit, and it'll be serious and it'll be funny." At a later show, he started opening up more about it, saying, "Anyone who says words hurt has never been punched in the face. I am not a victim. Yeah, that hurt, but I shook that off and went to work the next day. I don't go to the hospital for a paper cut." In the same show, Kevin Hart also made light of it when he gifted Chris Rock a goat and said that it was named Will Smith. Besides these quick comments, we didn't hear much about what Chris actually felt towards the situation, until now. At a comedy show he recently had in Phoenix, Arizona, an audience member apparently asked him to talk about what had taken place on stage, which is something I'm sure he's probably tired of being asked by now. He said that he actually had been contacted by the Academy with an offer to host the 2023 Oscars ceremony. Hosting the Oscars is a pretty big deal for any performer, and if you're asked back to do it for a second time, you should be honored, right? Well, Chris Rock definitely didn't see it that way. He said that returning back to the Oscars stage would be like returning back to the scene of the crime, specifically making reference to the O.J. Simpson trial where he killed his wife, a crime that started off with her leaving her glasses at an Italian restaurant. He said that asking him to host the Oscars again would be like asking O.J. Simpson's wife to return to the restaurant, a pretty shocking comparison that left people pretty baffled. A slap and someone dying are on pretty different levels, but alright man. It seems pretty clear from the comments he has made that Chris Rock views this slap as a pretty big deal, despite having laughed it off in shock in the moment. We also know from Will Smith's own comments that Chris Rock and his team have refused any sort of discussion between the two or any apology from Will. Will said in his laughable YouTube apology video that Chris's team said to stop reaching out to him and that they would reach out to Will when Chris decided he's ready. With Chris seeming to open open up more and more about the situation, it seems like Chris may be ready to talk with Will about it soon. But on the other hand, with the drastic comparisons he's been making, it's possible that Chris may never accept an apology from Will at all. At the 94th Annual Academy Awards, the show managed to stir up viewership and attention again when Will Smith infamously walked up onto stage and slapped the host Chris Rock in the face. This was due to what he saw as a distasteful joke the comedian had made about his wife. Will then sat back in his seat and continued to yell at Chris as he tried to get the show moving again, seemingly shocked and in disbelief about what had happened. Will was quick to speak out after the event and apologized for what had occurred, after he received a hefty punishment from the Academy. But it looked like Chris Rock was staying mostly quiet about the event, but it seems that over the weekend he finally decided he was ready to speak up about it in his comedy show. He had two big comedy shows over the weekend, one at Madison Square Garden on Saturday and one in New Jersey on Sunday, and he finally addressed the altercation that took place way back in March. Here's what he said on stage. "Anyone who says words hurt has never been punched in the face. I'm not a victim. Yeah, that shit hurt, mother. But I shook that shit off and went to work the next day. I don't go to the hospital for a paper cut." He said this on Sunday and apparently said something very similar in his show on Saturday. Immediately after the infamous slap, Rock had made a comment about how he would eventually talk about the event once he was ready. At a show that took place mere days after, he said, "How was your weekend? I don't have a bunch of shit about what happened, so if you came to hear that, I have a whole show I wrote before this weekend. I'm still kind of processing what happened. So at some point I'll talk about that and it will be serious and funny." The show had quickly sold out and he even received a standing ovation when he got onto the stage. The slap was groundbreaking for those that watched the live ceremony and even those who had to hunt down a video clip of it later. When it first happened, many people were confused about what was even going on. Chris Rock made a G.I. Jane joke towards Jada Pinkett Smith, poking fun at her baldness, which came as a result of her alopecia diagnosis. Will obviously felt offended by the joke and needed to defend his wife, marching up on stage and slapping Chris Rock in the face. He then returned to his seat and said, "Keep my wife's name out your mouth." Many people wondered if this was staged, but when it was revealed that authorities arrived and there was talk of pressing charges, these rumors were quickly shut down. Fortunately for Will, Chris did not press any charges against him, but the Academy did end up punishing him. Smith was removed from the committee and banned from all Academy events for the next 10 years. While he can still be nominated for Oscars, he just can't go up and receive them. The comment by Chris Rock, however, wasn't the only thing related to Will Smith to come out of the Madison Square Garden comedy show. Kevin Hart also seemed to poke some fun at the situation. Kevin Hart brought a goat up on stage, giving it to Chris Rock as a present. He said in an interview that it was because Chris Rock is his GOAT, or greatest of all time, and he wanted him to feel that. He also hilariously said during the show that the GOAT was named Will Smith. What Rock has decided to do with the GOAT after the show is unknown, and that's all I have for you for now.
Why is Will Smith now blaming Chris Rock for the Oscars slap? He's clearly trying to make his re-entry into Hollywood, as the press tour for his new film Emancipation is kicking into gear. Over the past few weeks, the actor has been making more and more public appearances, and of course, giving more explanations for that infamous Oscars incident. But it's his latest appearance with Trevor Noah on The Daily Show that has got fans really talking. When the conversation turns to the slap, Will says that it was an explosion of anger that was years in the making, and he also seemed to partially put the blame back onto Chris Rock. Will said with a laugh that he has no independent recollection of the fight, but that he understands how shocking that was for people. He agreed that he was in a daze when it happened, and he said, "I was gone, dude. That was a rage that had been bottled up for a really long time. I understand the pain." When Noah speculates as to what caused his outburst, he says flat out that it stemmed from rage going back to his childhood. Quote, "It was a lot of things. It was a little boy that watched his father beat up his mother, you know? All of that just bubbled up in that moment. That's not who I want to be. movie. Will also claimed that there were other things he was going through that night which no one knew about, and that's why he erupted in violence. He went on to say, "That was a horrific night, as you can imagine. You know, there's many nuances and complexities to it, but at the end of the day, I just lost it, you know?" Then he says, "You just never know what somebody is going through." At this point, Will then makes a plea to the audience, telling them to be nicer to each other because you never know another person's troubles. So in a way, he was almost saying that comedians like Chris Rock should tread lightly when telling jokes because at any moment someone in the audience might snap, because of course they're going through something. To be fair, Will also made it clear that that didn't justify his behavior that night, but the whole thing still came off as a bit of an excuse. And it gets even worse when Trevor asked what he learned from the incident, and he just says, "We gotta be nice to each other, man, you know? It's hard." He explained that hurt people, and that he took his pain and put it onto someone else. In response, Noah says that he believes that the slap was not who he is as a person, and says that everybody makes mistakes. Will agreed and said, "I've always wanted to be Superman, I've always wanted to swoop in and save the damsel in distress, and I had to humble down, and I had to realize that I'm a flawed human, and I still have an opportunity to go out into the world and contribute in a way that fills my heart, and hopefully help other people." What he's referring to, of course, is his new movie Emancipation, which may well see him in contention for another award next year, but the question of whether or not it's too soon for him to make a comeback is still up in the air, and he knows that. Will says he will absolutely respect moviegoers who are not ready to see his upcoming film. Instead, he says that his deepest concern is that the Emancipation team will face the consequences of his actions, and the idea that they might be denied because of him is something that he finds very distressing. In the end, he says he just hopes that their work will be honored and not affected by his horrific decision. He also believes that audiences will go out and see the movie. He said, "I'm hoping that the material, the power of the film, the timeliness of the story, I'm hoping that the good can be done would open people's hearts at a minimum to see and recognize and support the incredible artists in and around this film." Will has the lead role in the movie playing Peter, a man whose path to freedom forces him to rely on his wits, unwavering faith, and deep love for his family as he journeys north, escaping the cold-blooded hunters and surviving the unforgiving swamps of Louisiana along the way. The film is inspired by a true story, which came from the 1863 photos of whipped Peter, taken during a Union Army medical examination that first appeared in Harper's Weekly. According to Will, the movie served as one of the most grueling and transformative processes of his entire career, and that his character's journey mirrored his own search for faith during that difficult time in his life. The actor said that he's learned many things from Peter, and he's absolutely changed after having this spiritual run-in with this great man. But as for the film's reception, there's a real possibility that it might become part of his 2023 Oscar campaign. We know that back in March, Will was banned from attending Academy events for a decade, but funnily enough, he is still technically eligible to be nominated and even win another award at next year's ceremony. The only thing is, if he does win, he wouldn't be allowed to accept the award in person.
Coming in at number 10, Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is an actor, comedian, writer, and producer known for his energetic slapstick performances, and Carrey first gained recognition in 1990 after landing a recurring role in the American sketch comedy television series called In Living Color. After hearing what happened to Chris Rock, Jim told CBS's Gayle King that he was sickened not only by Smith's actions, but by Hollywood celebrities who still gave Smith a standing ovation for his Best Actor win for King Richard. He went on to say, "Hollywood is just spineless en masse, and it felt like this is a really clear indication that we aren't the cool club anymore. I'd have announced this morning that I was suing Will for $200 million because that video is going to be there forever. It's going to be ubiquitous. That insult is going to last a very long time. If you want to yell from the audience and show disapproval or say something on Twitter, that's fine, but you do not have the right to walk up on stage and smack somebody in the face because they said words." But before we jump into our next point, make sure you tap that like button to show some love to the channel. In at number 9, David Spade. Comedian David Spade and Chris Rock have been pals for a while now, so many were expecting him to release some sort of response to what took place at the Oscars. The pair first became good friends and comedic collaborators when they appeared on Saturday Night Live together in the 90s. They also co-starred in Adam Sandler's hit movie Grown Ups and the sequel Grown Ups 2. So knowing that they have a personal and working relationship, it only made sense that Spade would defend Chris. Initially, David tweeted, "A G.I. Jane joke?" Then when someone on Twitter asked why would you phrase this as a G.I. Jane joke instead of a joke about a woman with alopecia, he responded with, "Because comedians don't have a medical chart for everyone in the audience." In at number 8, Kathy Griffin. Comedian Kathy Griffin was another celebrity defending Chris Rock after seeing Will Smith slap him. She tweeted out in response to what happened and said, "Let me tell you something, it's a very bad practice to walk up on stage and physically attack a comedian. Now we all have to worry about who wants to be the next Will Smith in comedy clubs and theaters." Although many people in her replies were quick to pull up that photo of her holding a ketchup-covered Donald Trump head as if to say that she did condone violence, Griffin made a valid point though. This will set an awful precedent for people feeling like they can approach a comedian on stage just when they don't like what they're hearing. In at number 7, Howard Stern. Howard Stern is an American radio and television personality, comedian, and author. He's also best known for his radio show, The Howard Stern Show, which gained popularity when it was nationally syndicated on terrestrial radio from 1986 to 2005. He has since been broadcasting on SiriusXM satellite radio since 2006. During his show on Monday, though, the radio host spoke about the Will Smith-Chris Rock incident and said, "This is a sign of great mental illness when you can't control your impulse. Not only that, it was hardly an insulting joke. It was not even a good joke. You don't provide security? You don't have someone come up there? Chris Rock was just trying to make people laugh at the effing ceremony, which was so long and boring." In at number 6, Judd Apatow. Judd Apatow is also a comedian, director, producer, and screenwriter. He's also the founder of Apatow Productions, through which he has produced and directed the films The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, Funny People, This Is 40, Trainwreck, and The King of Staten Island. In response to what took place at this year's Oscars, Judd wrote in a since-deleted tweet, "He could have ended his life. That's pure out-of-control rage and violence. They've heard a million jokes about them in the last 3 decades. They are not freshmen in the world of Hollywood and comedy. He lost his mind." And the person who reposted his deleted tweet also commented on the matter and said, "Judd Apatow getting ratioed to hell feels like a fitting end to the night." Coming at number 5, Ethan Klein. H3H3's Ethan Klein was another comedian that was quick to defend Chris Rock and condemn Will Smith's actions. Following the slap heard around the world, the H3 host took to Twitter to share his thoughts on what happened. In the tweet, Ethan said, "Will Smith just a walking L since his wife decided to start weekly humiliating him on her Facebook show. Probably should deal with whatever trauma he has with her instead of punching Chris Rock in the face for an extremely tame joke. He needs to be escorted out of the Oscars." He then went on to say, "Will Smith won and got a standing ovation. I'm in awe. The show went on like nothing happened. Will Smith punched a comedian for doing his job. He's a celebrity in the front row of the Oscars where it's normal to be roasted, bad taste or not, defending Will equals brain rot." In at number 4, John Leguizamo. John Leguizamo is an actor, comedian, producer, and writer. He first rose to fame with a co-starring role in Super Mario Bros. As Luigi and a supporting role in the crime drama known as Carlito's Way. In response to what happened at the Oscars, he told Entertainment Tonight that at first he thought that the moment was a sketch until he realized that there was no punchline coming. He went on to say, "I thought Will's performance was amazing and I'm sorry that he tarnished it with this behavior. I mean, nobody likes to be made fun of, but you gotta have a sense of humor about yourself. Can't take yourself that seriously. I mean, we're just acting, you know? Let's just relax." Very true. Coming at number 3, Tom Segura. After the Academy tweeted, "The Academy does not condone violence of any form. Tonight we are delighted to celebrate our 94th Academy Awards winners who deserve this moment of recognition from their peers and movie lovers around the world." In response, Tom quote tweeted that and said, "LOL, you fully endorsed it. F Will Smith." He then took things even further and said in another tweet, "F Will Smith's candy butt smacking a dude 4 inches shorter and 50 pounds lighter. He's just in his feelings cause his bald-headed B been effing around on him for years and he takes it. We all know who he wishes he could slap. Hashtag cuck Will." Coming at number 2, Joe Rogan. In a recent episode of his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, Joe defended fellow comedian Chris Rock while condemning Will Smith's actions. While speaking with martial artist Josh Barnett, Rogan described Chris's joke as mild and said that this will set an awful precedent for comedy clubs. During the show, he said, "First of all, that whole scene is a great example of what's wrong with the glorification of just being able to go up to someone and smack them in the face. Chris Rock's doing his effing job. There's a professional comedian whose job is to roast people. That's what he's doing, and what he did wasn't even insulting. It was a mild joke." He then continued and said, "You can't just go smack a man in the face in front of the world and go about business as usual. It sets a terrible precedent in so many different ways. It sets a terrible precedent for comedy clubs. Like, are people going to decide that they're going to go on stage and smack the comedian now?" And last but certainly not least, our number 1 spot, Amy Schumer. Amy Schumer happened to also be performing some hosting duties at the Oscars this year, and so a lot of people wanted to hear her reaction to what happened as well, seeing as though she was actually there. When interviewed about the incident, she said that she was still triggered and traumatized as she praised comedian Chris Rock for handling it like a pro after Will Smith stormed onto the stage and slapped him during the 94th award show. She also added in an Instagram post caption, "I think we are all going to be processing tonight for a while." And then she also said in a deleted post, "I think we can all agree that the best way to unpack what happened is to stream my series Life and Beth and see me on tour this fall. But for real, still triggered and traumatized. I love my friend Chris Rock and believe he handled it like a pro. Stayed up there and gave an Oscar to his friend Questlove, and the whole thing was so disturbing. So much pain in Will Smith. Anyway, I'm still in shock and stunned and sad. I'm proud of myself and my co-host, but yeah, waiting for this sickening feeling to go away from what we all witnessed." Celebrities are now reacting to Will Smith slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars, and we've got everything you need to know. After Chris made that joke about Jada Pinkett Smith that caused Will to get up out of his seat and slap him, you could see the visible confusion on everyone's face. Some people gasped while others applauded him. One of those people that are standing strong on Will's side through all of this is his son Jaden, although several other high-profile celebrities are also reacting to the news as well. In response to the news, Jaden Smith tweeted, "And that's how we do it." Nicki Minaj was another person defending Will in several tweets and said, "I love Chris Rock. I don't think he would have made that joke had he known what Jada recently shared, but between him and the whole team at the Oscars, you mean to tell me not one of y'all heard this woman just share this heartbreaking story? Hashtag come on son." Adding in another tweet, "You just got to witness in real time what happens in a man's soul when he looks over to the woman he loves and sees her holding back tears from a little joke at her expense. This is what any and every real man feels in that instant. While y'all seeing the joke, he's seeing her pain." Also, apparently Denzel Washington even said to Will a few minutes before his speech, "At your highest moment, be careful, that's when the devil comes for you." And because of this moment, Will also had a lot of people talking about toxic masculinity and whether or not Will was the personification of that. To many, they feel that this was poorly handled by both men. Bernardine Evaristo, who is the president of the Royal Society of Literature, tweeted out, "What a thing to wake up to. Only the 5th black man in nearly 100 years to win an Oscar for male lead, and the 1st in 16 years, resorts to violence instead of utilizing the power of words to slay Chris Rock. Then he claims God and love made him do it." Liam Payne also was in attendance for the Oscars when this happened as well and was quoted by Good Morning Britain as saying, "I believe whatever he felt that he did, he had the right to do. I had to leave my chair, I'll be honest with you. It cut me really deep." Chris Rock's younger brother is now challenging Will Smith to a boxing match, and this comes after the disastrous incident at the 2022 Oscars where Smith slapped Chris over the G.I. Jane 2 joke that he made about Jada Pinkett Smith. Following what happened that night, the King Richard winner publicly apologized to Chris and then resigned from the Academy. However, in addition to that, the Academy also decided to ban Will from attending the Oscars for 10 years. Plus, according to reports, this has put a number of his movie projects on hold as well. While speaking with TMZ, Chris's younger brother Kenny spoke about how he just signed a deal with celebrity boxing founder Damon Feldman. He's actually scheduled to be in a fight in Florida later this year, and when asked if he was excited for it, Kenny replied, "Most definitely." He was then, of course, dragged into the controversy when the interviewer asked him if there was anyone that he wanted to fight. In response, Kenny said, "Any and everybody. Anybody willing to step up and take on the challenge." And I'm sure that they were hoping he would just automatically say Will Smith, but when he didn't, they just pried a little more. Kenny was then asked if he thinks his brother and Will should get into the ring to settle their dispute, but in response, Kenny said, "No, they shouldn't, but I should get in the ring with Will Smith." He also told them that Chris is doing great after the slap, but was also skeptical of the Academy's ban on Will Smith. He believes it will be lifted after only a few years and that they're just doing this until the uproar is over. While talking with the LA Times, Kenny said that a proper punishment would be Smith having his first ever Oscar taken away. He goes on to say, "It eats at me watching it over and over again because you've seen a loved one being attacked and there's nothing you can do about it. Every time I'm watching the videos, it's like a rendition that just keeps going over and over in my head. My brother was no threat to him and he just had no respect for him at that moment. You just belittled him in front of millions of people that watched the show." Then while speaking about the joke itself, Kenny alleged, "The joke was funny, it wasn't hilarious funny, but I know that if he knew that she had alopecia, he wouldn't make a joke about that, but he didn't know." As for Chris's other brother Tony, he has still yet to accept Will Smith's apology. Recently he even bashed the actor at a comedy show and told the audience, "You gonna hit my mother effing brother because your B gave you a side eye?" And as for Chris Rock, well, he is going to be holding on to his opinions on the matter because he knows just how much money he can make from it. Everyone under the sun has given their reaction to the Oscar slap, but the person everyone wants to hear from is Chris Rock. So far, the only sort of response that he's given was shortly after the incident at his sold-out show in Boston. The 57-year-old comedian performed at the Wilbur Theater and opened by saying to the crowd, "So, how was your weekend?" Clearly alluding to the incident on everyone's mind. After the crowd sat back down, he continued by saying with tears in his eyes, "Let me be all misty and I don't have a bunch to say about that." He then added, "I had written a whole show before this weekend. I'm still processing what happened, so at some point I'll talk about that It'll be serious, it'll be funny, but right now I'm gonna tell some jokes. He also confirmed that he had not spoken to anyone despite what you may have heard. All eyes have been on Chris Rock and how he was going to respond to the now infamous 2022 Oscars slap from Will Smith. Especially with the comedian starting his new tour, fans who had already purchased tickets were excited to hear what his jokes about the situation were going to be. During his first show at the Wilbur Theater in Boston, the front two rows gave him a standing ovation when he came out on stage. The 57-year-old comedian performed at the Wilbur Theater and opened up by saying to the crowd, "So, how was your weekend?" Clearly alluding to the incident on everyone's mind. After the crowd sat back down, he continued by saying with tears in his eyes, "Let me be all misty and shit. I don't have a bunch of shit to say about that." He then added, "I'd written a whole show before this weekend. I'm still processing what happened, so at some point I'll talk about that shit. It'll be serious, it'll be funny, but right now I'm going to tell some jokes." He also confirmed that he had not spoken to anyone despite what you may have heard. For his second show in Boston, Rock took to the stage dressed in all white and began his set once again by addressing what happened over the weekend. However, this time he had to deal with a lot of issues at his show. Stick around to hear about how he shut down this heckler who yelled out about Will Smith though. On top of the heckler, another man was actually arrested at Chris Rock's show after he caused a big disruption and attempted to attack a police officer. The Boston Police Department later told People magazine that two patrons watching the show caused a loud disturbance over the venue's requirement that they wear a mask. This happened at around 8:30 p.m., but only one person was arrested. I'm guessing the other person magically discovered their mask when the handcuffs decided to come out. They continued by saying that one of the patrons was compliant with the request, the second became increasingly agitated, yelling loudly, disrupting the show, and physically towards the officer and theater staff. The person was later identified as 25-year-old Caleb Hurd of Quincy, Massachusetts. Hurd pushed the officer and theater staff and also struck the officer in the leg, according to officials. Once Hurd was removed from the venue, the police then apparently pepper sprayed him because he continued to try to attack the officer responding to the call. Rock has also been having some issues with fans who are overpaying for his tickets and then complaining that he doesn't really talk about the Will Smith situation. TickPick, an app that promises no service fees and the lowest prices on the market with a price match guarantee, even tweeted out, "We sold more tickets to see Chris Rock overnight than we did in the past month combined." Currently, his 7:30 p.m. shows are going for over $1,000, with the 10 p.m. encore and subsequent dates going for upwards of $380 a ticket. At the second show, Rock had to shut down a heckler who decided to yell out "F Will Smith." After that heckler yelled out, "F Will Smith" chants started to ring out in the audience, although Chris repeatedly said "no, no, 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 no" in response, clearly indicating to his audience that just because Will Smith did something that they didn't like, that didn't mean that it was open season to chant hate towards him. And just like that, Chris Rock became even more respectable in my eyes. I mean, if anyone is justified in letting his audience hate on Will Smith, it's this guy. But instead, he just chooses to keep it classy. Rock also confirmed that he would not be taking any legal action against Will Smith for the slap, but that doesn't mean that the Academy won't be serving up some disciplinary action.